QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021 Payroll and Employee Reports. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars practice file. We currently have the open windows open. You can open the open windows by going to the View dropdown, selecting the Open Windows list. We're now going to be taking a look at payroll reports, like all other reports, other than the major financial statement reports, balance sheet and income statement reports. Payroll reports will be supplementing, adding to line items or information that could be found on the major financial statement reports, balance sheet, and income statement reports. Now remember that payroll is something that's going to be like an add-on feature within QuickBooks. So some companies will run payroll through QuickBooks. Some companies might use an external payroll provider to help them to process the payroll. So that's the first thing you want to understand. The reports we look at here will be important whether you run the payroll through QuickBooks or whether you have an external provider, because you'll still get these reports and need to put the financial statement together for them. So note that the payroll, you need the financial information, and payroll itself has a whole lot of things you need to give information to both the IRS and the employees, including, of course, the paychecks with the information on it, with each paychecks, the paycheck stubs that will be included, and then payroll taxes, quarterly payroll tax information 941s, yearly payroll tax information 940s, and then state payroll tax information, which will depend on the state you are in. Now, if you have the paid payroll within QuickBooks, they should be able to automate a lot of that process, but it will, of course, result in a whole lot of data that will be included to break down payroll into all these bite-sized kind of components. So first off, just remember you have to have payroll basically on. We're using the manual payroll in this practice problem to process the payroll. So we actually process payroll through QuickBooks and therefore have the data in the system. To turn on the manual payroll in 2021 software, go to the drop-down for Edit and then Preferences. You want to look at the payroll information here, and then go to Company Preference up top and go to that Manual Payroll, which is an option that I don't think was there prior to 2021. So I'm going to close this back off. Prior to 2021, you had to go in the Help menu, search in the Help items, and search for Manual Payroll in order to turn it on. If you have this arrow at the bottom, that typically means you're running payroll within QuickBooks, and you should be able to get payroll reports, although you will not have as many options with payroll if you have the manual payroll as you would if you had the paid payroll. So keeping that in mind, let's think about the balance sheet and income statement first. Open up the reports, company and financial. We're going to go to the balance sheet, opening up the balance sheet. I'm going to change the dates up top, customizing reports, going from 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. January and February is the data that we have in the system thus far. I'm then going to open up the Pnl Profit and Loss or income statement, reports drop down, company and financial, and then take a look at that profit and loss. We're going to change the dates from 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. Now, when we process the payroll, we saw that there's going to be many accounts that will affect it. There's kind of at least two steps within the payroll. One is that we're going to pay the employees, and that's when we actually write the checks. And two is we're going to have to pay the payroll liabilities. So we're going to have to track all that kind of information in the system. If we take a look at the balance sheet, that means that on the balance sheet, the checking account's going to go down. Some companies might have a separate checking account for payroll itself, but we can see wherever the paycheck is going, we're obviously going to have a decrease for the paycheck when we process the employee payroll. The other side would be on the income statement. On the income statement, which would be payroll expenses, that would be recording the other side of part of the payroll check, although we record the entire expense here as opposed to the net check in the checking account. And then we have the difference between, which would be the withholdings that we took out. That would be included in the liability for payroll down here in the liabilities section, payroll liabilities. So that would be when we process the check on the employee side. Then we also have the employer taxes for Social Security and Medicare. That's why it's doubled up here, which would increase the liability again here. And it would be recorded on the profit and loss. Profit and loss, we could break it out into payroll taxes for the employer portion, or it would be included, grouped in here in payroll expenses, which is the default typically within QuickBooks. And then we would pay off the liabilities. When we pay off the liabilities that we have accumulated to the government, then we'd have to write another check. So the checking account would then be going down, or some type of electronic payment, decreasing the checking account. The other side would then be decreasing the payroll liabilities. So that's kind of the general, you can think about that transaction as a whole, as if you had all your employees as of one person and you had one big paycheck. And that's what you need to do to basically think about the effect on the financial statements. But of course, you've got to break that out into a whole bunch more detail so you can accommodate the reporting requirements to the employees. You got to report that on a year-to-date statement as well as a check-by-check statement on each pay stub for each employee. And then you got to track that information for quarterly reporting and yearly reporting. So it's a lot more complex. To get the financials right in total is a lot easier than thinking about all the detail that you're going to have to report in order to fulfill all the reporting requirements for payroll. So let's think about the reports now and how they would tie into basically the financials. A couple ways we can get in there. You can go to the reports dropdown. You can go to the employee and payroll. And the employee payroll data in Excel, this is a really nice tool. They basically, if you have Excel, they will export a lot of information into Excel that is in a format in a way that you would possibly see it oftentimes if you were to get payroll from like a third-party provider. This will look a lot like what you might receive in a whole bundle from someone like an ADP or Paychex if you were to do the worksheet externally. So I do want to print that out, and then we'll look at that, and we'll also look at some of these payroll reports as well. So I'm going to print this one out, this Excel report, and let it export to Excel. Now, it will take a while to do this because it's putting a lot of data out there. Now, it's basically running macros, so you got to trust QuickBooks in order to do that. I'm going to run the macros, and then it gives me this nice little worksheet in Excel. I'm going to say it's going to be a yearly report. I'm going to go for the year of 2001. So I'm going to go January through December. Now, I could run it for the first quarter. The data is actually in there for the first quarter, but I'm going to run it for the year for now. I'm going to have everything checked off here at the bottom, and I'm going to go, let's get the data. So here we have it. Again, a really, really neat report. We only have 2 employees that we're going to have in the system. So let's just kind of review this. This is similar to what you would get from like an ADP or a Paychex kind of information, if they were to run your payroll. So we got the employee journal by check. So this is our 2 employees, Erica and Atom. So we've got the number, the period, the pay period. This is the compensation for both of them. It's run by pivot tables up top. But this is the compensation that they're going to receive. This is how much was taken out. You can imagine this is like their paycheck stub in total for the entire time period, in this case, the year. So the federal taxes that were taken out, and you can imagine this information would then be used to populate, say, W-2 information if it was for the entire year. We also would have to break this down from check to check so we can record it on their paycheck stub. Social Security taken out, Medicare taken out, additional taxes, state taxes, we didn't have any in our system. SIT, this is the net check. So notice you can think of the net check, basically, you can do the same calculation on multiple levels. You can do it on a check by check, employee by employee. You can do it by multiple checks or the whole year for one employee and think about the same kind of thing, which would be the year-to-date data information like on the pay stub. And you can think of like all employees as if there were one employees, either on a pay period by pay period basis or on a total year, like the total year basis as we see the total down below. So it's the same kind of thing, but you can see how you can sort the data here. Then we have the year-to-date summary. We have, once again, breaking out between Adam and Erica. And again, you can imagine the situation. Notice the abbreviation here, quarter-to-date and then the year-to-date. So we got to break out the same kind of information, but by quarter and by year-to-date and then by employee, depending on what our needs are for quarterly taxes, yearly taxes, or payroll reporting information. So we got the gross, that's how much was earned, the federal withholdings, the Social Security, and the Medicare. Notice these 2 reports are all basically reporting the employee side. They are not reporting the employer side of things. The employer side of things aren't there. We have to tack on Social Security and Medicare, at least on the employer side of things, over and above this employee data. But this employee data is important because, of course, that's the stuff that we need to be telling the employee as well as the government. Here's the year-to-date summary, second layout. And notice this is the layout that you would typically see kind of on a paycheck. So now you have a vertical type of layout. So you have the year-to-date and the quarter-to-date information. And that gives you the total salaries, earnings, minus what was taken out, federal, Social Security, Medicare, and then here's the total. So here's the year-to-date information and the quarter-to-date. When you have the paycheck stub, you have this information on the year-to-date format as well as on the actual pay period that was ended format for that one particular. The next tab is going to report the number of hours. Now this would typically be applicable if you have an hourly employee. Our first employee was hourly, the second was salary, so we didn't have any hours that were reported for the salary employee. Rates and hours by job. So we had the one employee that had a rate of $20 an hour. Second was salary, so this is the salaried employee basically rate. That's the rate for I think it was $55,000 for monthly tax payment, so that's breaking down to 12 payments. The next one is going to get into state information, so I'm not going to keep going with that, but just note that Excel sheet is a nice, useful tool for reports in and of themselves. So let's go to the reports again. Let's go to the reports dropdown. Let's this time go to the reports center, and I'm going to maximize the reports center. We're in the standard tab. We're going to go down to the employee and payroll. So the payroll summary, probably the most common report. Let's take a look at that one. Running it from, I'm going to do it just for the 2 months this time, 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. And so this is going to be our information broken out. You can see once again by Adam and Erica. We've got, it's similar to what you would see on a pay stub. So we've got the gross pay up top, and it breaks out salary or hourly. Then what was taken out of the check, which includes federal income tax withholding, Medicare, Social Security, and that'll be the total withholdings. And then we have the net check. So this is the net check that went out. And then we also have the employer taxes and contributions. So this is probably the key report right here, because it's giving you both the employee information as well as the employer information, matching, in our case, the Medicare and the Social Security. That would be in all cases, but you'd also have federal unemployment tax and so on for that as well. So this is giving you a lot of the data that's going to be necessary for just understanding your payroll by employee, and then including the employer taxes, which can be used to help populate the reports, the quarterly, the 941 reports, and the W-2s. Note that if you're paying for QuickBooks, then QuickBooks will help to automate that process, but you still want to kind of understand these reports. If you go to the employee tab up top and you want to payroll tax forms for the W-2s and the liabilities and whatnot up here, you could use their system to try to help you generate those forms. But again, you want to understand, the process of how those forms are being populated. All right, and then we got the report center, and this is the payroll item detail. If we run this one, let's check it out for the period of 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. And by the way, not a lot of people really understand payroll that much. You can see the amount of data is basically overwhelming, which is why payroll has become kind of a specialty type of area. So now we're breaking it out by items: salary, hourly, the federal withholding, the Medicare, Social Security, and then within each item, the actual check that's being applied to those items. So note once again that the items are the things that are kind of driving the transactions in a similar way as the items for like inventory and service items help to drive the transaction of what will be recorded on an invoice, sales receipt, or bill for like the purchase of inventory. These payroll items help to track what's going to happen with regards to the recording of the financials when you process the payroll. These are set up in the lists up top. They are in the payroll item list. Now, you don't set these up as you go. We will set these up when we process the payroll. They typically will be set up kind of automatically in like a question type of format. We won't have to actually go in like we typically would with a inventory item and manually put in all the data. QuickBooks will be able to hopefully to help us out, especially for the federal taxes, the things that are going to be universal for the whole country, like the Medicare and rules and the Social Security rules. So, but these items then are driving. So when you go through this little questionnaire thing, you'll be able to see what the system, we will be able to see when we do this in the practice problem, what QuickBooks is doing with this item to drive this to actually record on the financial statements when you process the payroll. So closing this back out, Social Security, that's all the items. And if you drill down on this, you get to the actual checks. So that is that. Let's go back to the report center, and we're going to go down to the payroll detail review. Let's take a look at that one, running that report from 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. And so we have this broken out for Adam and Erica. So now it's got the detail for each of the employees. with, once again, the salary, the earnings that are put in place. This would be the gross pay, the amount that basically would be reported on the income statement. So the income statement reporting that when we process the payroll. Federal withholdings, this would be the amount that was taken out and therefore recorded in the liability for them. The payroll liability when we process the payroll. Medicare was taken out, would be recorded as a liability. Social Security would be recorded on the balance sheet as a liability. Federal unemployment, that's going to be the employer tax. Medicare for the employer side would be a liability and an expense for payroll taxes. Social Security, employer. And then California information or state information. We didn't populate any state information, but you would have to, depending on the state requirements. And then the same for Erica. Let's see what else we have. I'm going to close this one up so we don't have too many things open. Payroll transaction by payee. Let's take a look at that one. Running that report, 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. And so now we've got the actual transactions, and they're just giving us the transactions and a quick overview of the transactions. So here's our 2 employees. These are the payments that we made to the government. So this is when we process the paying of the liabilities, decreasing the checking account, decreasing the payable for payroll. These are our 2 employees, of course, with our 2 paychecks that we're doing for each month. We had 2 months monthly payroll. If you double click on this information, then you could get to the payroll check, and you can get to the detail of the check here. Closing this back out, closing this back out. Let's close this one. We have the detail then. Let's take a look at the detail report. Payroll transaction detail 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. Transaction, is that the detail report? Doesn't look that detailed. So it's the same. Let's close this back out. We want the payroll transaction by payee. Payroll detail review. Let's run that one. This is going to be 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. Okay, so we already did the detail review. We saw that last time. All right. So then let's go to the next one. We got the payroll transaction detail. Let's run that one. And I'm going to say this is from 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. So now we've got each paycheck. So now we've got Adam. This is kind of an overwhelming report, but it shows you what will actually be recorded in the GL by paycheck. And all this stuff will basically be in the GL by paycheck, right? So we got the check, the individual check for Adam. We have the salary amount. That's going to, as an expense, this will be an expense up top on the income statement. And then we've got the federal withholding. That's going to be the amount that was taken out of the paycheck. That'll be our payroll liability on the balance sheet. And then these 2 items are the Social Security for employer and then the employee. One taken out of the paycheck, the other paid over and above by the employer. And this, I believe, is indicating that the other side of the employer that was paid over and above the amount of the check is also going to be an expense on the income statement. Same for the Medicare. We had the amount $66.46 taken out of this check, but that was paid by the employee. We also had the amount that was paid by the employer. Both those increase in the liability of what we're going to have to pay to the government, and $66.46 is going to be included as an expense over and above the payroll expense for the employee. And you can see that's a lot of detail that's going to be going on the financials if you break it out by employee, all those transactions by employee. And then of course we have the paying of the liabilities when we pay down the payroll liabilities, checking account going down, the payable to the government going down. Let's close that one back out. And so then we have the payroll liability balances. If I run that report, we're going to say this is from 01/01/21 to 02/28/21. So this is going to be our balances for the liability accounts. These are things that we have collected from the employees, payroll, meaning we took it out of their check, federal income tax, Social Security, and Medicare, and then our side that we're going to have to be paying. So that would be the federal income tax, not our taxes, but the employees' federal income tax, Medicare, Social Security, federal unemployment, Medicare, Social Security, employer and employee side, and then of course any California taxes or state taxes if those are applicable. And that's that. So let's close that back out. Liability balances, payroll item list. Let's take a look at that. Payroll item list. And so these are our payroll items. Once again, we saw them in the lists and the item list here. These are the types of things that are helping to drive what is going to be recorded in payroll in a similar way as items such as service items and inventory items help drive what will be recorded on the financials when selling something on an invoice or a sales receipt. Closing that back out, so we got the employee earnings summary. Let's take a look at that. And that's going to be 010121 to 022821. Similar type of information in a register type format. So I think the best way to look at this is in that Excel one, because that's one you can easily kind of adjust and see very easily. So I really like that Excel export thing for this type of report. Closing that back out. And then we got some state tax detail information. So I'll basically stop there. But just note that obviously, again, whether you do the payroll internally using QuickBooks, even if you have all the help from QuickBooks to do it, or if you do it externally with an ADP or a Paychex or some payroll company that's helping you with all the details, most people don't really understand payroll, and you're going to have to get it into the system, at least on a financial statement someplace. And also, payroll is one of the biggest areas where liability problems happen. So if getting a hold of payroll, even if you're not a payroll specialist, understanding it better than most people that are working in it, or most if you're doing the bookkeeping, even if you're not doing the payroll, it would be worth the time really to kind of understand these payroll reports better.